The story of the Nephilim is one of the Bible's most mysterious story. It speaks of strange beings who walked the earth in ancient times before the Great Flood. These beings are mentioned in the Book of Genesis, specifically in chapter 6. This short passage has created centuries of debate and a lot of different interesting theories. The text says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men. They saw that these human women were beautiful and decided to take them as wives. From these strange unions, children were born who became the Nephilim. They were described as the mighty men of old, the famous men of ancient renown and power. The word Nephilim itself is often translated to mean giants. However, some scholars believe the original Hebrew word more accurately means the fallen ones, hinting at their origin. A central mystery is the identity of the sons of God. Who were they? Interpretations vary widely and are the source of most of the ongoing theological discussion. The most popular and ancient theory is that the sons of God were angels. These were divine beings who left their heavenly home against God's direct and holy will. They abandoned their proper place to procreate with human women on the earth. This act was seen as a great transgression and a serious, unforgivable sin against God. This angelic interpretation suggests the Nephilim were a hybrid race. They were part angel and part human, possessing unique abilities and a very formidable physical stature and strength. Their existence is directly linked to the increasing wickedness upon the earth. The world became so corrupt that God regretted creating humanity and decided to send a global flood. This corruption was not just human sin, but a perversion of creation itself. The lines between the divine and the human had been unnaturally and sinfully blurred by them. The Nephilim were known for being powerful warriors and heroes of that era. Their fame was widespread, but it was a fame born from violence and great spiritual corruption. A second major theory offers a less supernatural explanation for these events. This view is known as the Sethite interpretation, and it is a common historical view. It proposes the sons of God were not angels at all. Instead, they were the righteous male descendants of Adam's son Seth, who was a very good man. The daughters of men, in this particular viewpoint, were the ungodly female descendants from the cursed lineage of Cain, who had murdered his own brother, named Abel. The sin, therefore, was not a divine human union. It was the godly line of Seth intermarrying with the wicked line of Cain, which corrupted their righteous ways. This union of believers with unbelievers led to a complete moral collapse. Their children, the Nephilim, were powerful but wicked leaders who led society further into its sin. A third, less common view, says the sons of God were human kings. These were powerful rulers from royal dynasties who began to claim they were divine beings. These kings practiced polygamy, taking any woman they desired for their harems. Their children would be a powerful ruling class, the mighty men mentioned in the Bible. Regardless of the theory, the outcome remains exactly the same in the story. The presence of the Nephilim was a key symptom of a world spiraling into chaos. This increasing wickedness is what prompted God to take drastic action. He saw that every intention of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The great flood of Noah was God's judgment upon this corrupted world. The flood was intended to cleanse the earth of its violence, its sin, and the Nephilim. The story of the Nephilim is greatly expanded in non-biblical ancient texts. The most famous of these ancient books is the extra-biblical first book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is not part of the standard Bible for most Christians. However, it was a very popular and influential text among ancient Jews and early Christians. Enoch provides specific names and details about the fallen angels. It says 200 of these angels, called the Watchers, descended on Mount Hermon to commit this sin. Their leaders were named Shemihaza and Azazel, among several others. They made a pact together to go against God's command and take human wives for themselves. According to Enoch, these fallen angels taught humanity forbidden knowledge and ancient secrets. This included warfare, sorcery, makeup, and astrology, which brought much more evil to earth. Azazel, for example, is said to have taught men how to make swords. He showed them how to craft shields and other weapons of war, increasing worldly violence. The giant offspring of these unions, the Nephilim, were said to be ferocious. They devoured all of the acquisitions of men, leaving nothing behind for them to eat. When humans could no longer sustain them, the giants turned on humanity itself. They began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, and then ate their flesh. The earth cried out to heaven because of all this lawlessness. The souls of the dead cried out, complaining about the violence and widespread destruction on the planet. In the Book of Enoch, God's judgment is specific and very severe. He sends his archangels to bind the fallen watchers in darkness until the final day of judgment. The spirits of the Nephilim giants, however, were treated differently by God. After their physical bodies were destroyed, their spirits were allowed to remain on the earth. These disembodied spirits, according to this tradition, became the evil spirits or demons. They would now wander the earth, continuing to afflict and mislead all of mankind. This explains the origin of demons in some theological traditions. They are the lingering evil spirits of the dead Nephilim, forever hungry and causing great, unending trouble. So the great flood came and wiped the slate clean. Noah, his family, and the animals on the ark were the only flesh to survive this worldwide deluge. This would seemingly mean the end of the Nephilim. All of them should have been destroyed in the floodwaters, along with the rest of corrupt humanity. However, a great mystery appears later in the Bible after the flood. The Nephilim are mentioned again in the Book of Numbers, creating a very interesting puzzle. This occurs when Moses sends 12 spies into the land of Canaan. They were sent to see the land that God had promised to give to the Israelites. When 10 of the 12 spies returned, they gave a fearful report. They said the land was wonderful, but its inhabitants were far too powerful for them to conquer. They reported seeing giants in the land, creating fear among the people. Specifically, they said, "We saw the Nephilim there," which terrified all of the Israelites. They also mentioned the descendants of Enoch, a tribe of giants. The spies said these people came from the Nephilim, directly connecting them to the pre-flood beings. The spies felt like grasshoppers in comparison to these Canaanite giants. Their report was so frightening that it caused the Israelites to rebel against Moses and God. This raises a very important and difficult question for many people today. How could the Nephilim exist after the flood if everyone on earth had been destroyed? One possible explanation is that the spies were simply exaggerating the truth. They were scared and used the legendary name Nephilim to make their point more effective. They wanted to discourage the Israelites from entering the promised land. So, they compared the tall people they saw to the most fearsome figures from their ancient history. Another theory suggests the genetics of the Nephilim somehow survived the flood. Perhaps one of Noah's son's wives carried the dormant genetic trait with her onto the ark. This is a highly speculative idea with very little textual support. Most scholars reject this theory, preferring simpler and more straightforward explanations for the unusual second mention. A third view considers the possibility of a second angelic incursion. This would mean that another, separate group of angels fell after the flood and repeated the original sin. This idea is also not explicitly supported by the biblical text. The primary story in Genesis connects the Nephilim event directly to the judgment of the Great Flood. What is clear is that tribes of giant people did exist in Canaan. The Bible mentions several of them, such as the Anakim, the Rephaim, and the Emim. The Anakim were the most famous of these giant clans. They were driven out of the hill country by Joshua, but some of them remained in Gaza and Ashdod. King Og of Bashan was another example of these giants. His bed was described as being made of iron and was over 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. The most famous giant of all was Goliath of Gath. He was the Philistine champion who was famously defeated by the young shepherd David with a sling and a stone. Goliath was described as being over 9 feet tall. His armor was incredibly heavy, and his spear was like a weaver's beam, a truly formidable and scary opponent. While not directly called a Nephilim, Goliath is often linked to them. He came from Gath, one of the cities where the descendants of Enoch had found refuge. So, the Nephilim seen by the spies were likely the Anakim. These were a tribe of very tall and powerful people who dominated the land of Canaan before Israel. Whether they were true descendants of the original Nephilim remains a mystery. It could be a direct lineage, or simply a term used for any impressive giant. The story's focus remains on faith versus fear. The 10 spies saw giants and were afraid, but the 2 faithful spies, Joshua and Caleb, trusted in God's power. They believed God could deliver any enemy, no matter their size, into their hands. Their faith was rewarded, while the fearful generation died in the wilderness for their unbelief. Today, the legend of the Nephilim continues to capture the modern imagination. The story is popular in books, movies, video games, and many different online conspiracy theories. Some modern theories connect the Nephilim to aliens from another planet. In this view, the sons of God were extraterrestrials who interbred with early primitive human beings. These theories propose that the Nephilim were alien-human hybrids. They suggest that ancient myths about gods and demigods are actually distorted memories of these alien encounters from long ago. This ancient astronaut theory reinterprets religious texts as historical records of contact. It is a popular idea in science fiction, but lacks any serious academic or scientific support. Other people search for physical evidence of the Nephilim's existence on Earth. They look for giant skeletons or massive, unexplainable ancient structures as possible proof of their existence. Over the years, many hoaxes have appeared on the internet. Photos of giant human skeletons being excavated are almost always fake, created with digital photo editing software. These hoaxes play on the public's fascination with the unknown. They feed the desire to believe that a secret, epic history has been hidden from the public eye. Legitimate archaeologists and scientists have never found any credible evidence. There are no giant skeletons in museums that would support the existence of a race of giants. The story is best understood within its original theological context. It serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the consequences of sin and forbidden unions in the Bible. The Nephilim represent a complete breakdown of God's created order. They are a symbol of a world so corrupted that it required a literal washing to be cleansed. Their story emphasizes the theme of separation in the Bible, the importance of keeping the holy separate from the profane, and the divine separate from the merely mortal. When these sacred boundaries are crossed, the result is chaos and judgment. This is a recurring pattern that can be seen throughout the entire biblical narrative. The Nephilim are a testament to the extreme wickedness of the pre-flood world. They are the ultimate example of how bad things had become before God intervened. Their great strength and fame were ultimately meaningless in the face of judgment. Their power could not save them from the floodwaters that covered the whole earth. The narrative teaches that true strength comes from righteousness and obedience to God. It does not come from physical might, worldly fame, or forbidden, secret, esoteric knowledge. The debate between the angelic view and the Sethite view continues today. Theologians and scholars still write papers arguing for one interpretation over all the other ones. The angelic view remains the most dramatic and influential throughout history. It has inspired countless works of art, literature, and speculation about the nature of angels and demons. The Sethite view is often seen as a safer, more rational explanation. It avoids the difficult theological problems that a hybrid angel-human race would inevitably create for readers. For example, could angels, who are spiritual beings, actually reproduce with humans? Jesus mentioned that angels in heaven do not marry, which complicates the entire angelic view. Proponents of the angelic view suggest the fallen angels could have taken physical form, or they might have possessed human men in order to accomplish their sinful goals. The mystery is part of what makes the story so endlessly compelling. The Bible provides just enough detail to spark our interest, but not enough to settle it. The Nephilim stand as a powerful and enduring symbol of rebellion. They represent the crossing of boundaries that were never meant to be crossed by anyone at all. Their legacy is one of corruption, violence, and divine judgment. They are a reminder of a lost world that existed before the time of Noah and his ark. The fascination with them reveals a human interest in origins. We are curious about where we come from and the forgotten ages that came long before us. The story also taps into our love for tales of monsters and heroes. The Nephilim were the superpowered beings of their day, both admired and feared by all. In a way, they were the world's first superheroes, but with a dark twist. Their powers came from an unholy source and led only to destruction and chaos. Whether they were angel hybrids or just powerful human tyrants, their role is the same. They are the catalyst for the story of the flood and God's rescue. They demonstrate the fragility of the created order. They show how easily sin and rebellion can corrupt the world and pervert the original good intentions of God. Their story warns against the prideful pursuit of power and forbidden knowledge. It shows that such pursuits ultimately lead to ruin and the judgment of a holy God. The Nephilim of Genesis were wiped out completely by the great flood. They were a part of the wicked world that was washed away, making way for a new beginning. The giants of Canaan, like the Anakim, were also eventually defeated. They were overcome by the Israelites, who were empowered by their strong faith in their God. The theme is consistent. God's people can overcome any giant. Whether the giant is a literal monster or a metaphorical obstacle, faith is the key to victory. The simple passage in Genesis has had a huge cultural impact. Its few verses have spawned entire mythologies and shaped beliefs about angels, demons, and the ancient past. It challenges us to consider the nature of good and evil. It forces us to ask questions about the spiritual world and its interaction with our physical world. The story's ambiguity allows for personal interpretation and deep reflection. Every reader can engage with the mystery and draw their own conclusions about the meaning of it. The Nephilim remain one of the Bible's most intriguing footnotes. They are a brief but unforgettable part of the grand, sweeping narrative of human history. Their tale is a stark reminder of the consequences of disobedience. It highlights the importance of adhering to the divine plan and respecting the established boundaries of creation. They were the mighty men of old, whose fame filled the ancient world. But their legacy was washed away, leaving only a mysterious story in its place. In the end, the true identity of the Nephilim is still debated. They remain shrouded in the mists of time, a puzzle from a world before the flood. They are the fallen ones, the giants, the mighty men of renown. Their story is a powerful, ancient echo of a time of great sin and judgment.